Yes. Good morning.
Morning.
Today we are sponsored by my father, Mr. Loiterman, Nishmas, my great-grandmother, right? My father's maternal grandmother, Mrs. Bubby Goldstein, as we knew of Bubby Lena. Leah Bas Yehuda, whose yortzeit is tonight and tomorrow, the 29th of Shvat. Mary Neshama, have an Aliyah. And Sunday's Daf today also is sponsored by Jeff and Chava Bela Wald, Lili Nishmas, Jeff's aunt. Eva Eisner Roebuck, Bluma Bas Menachem Mendel, whose yortzeit is also tonight and tomorrow, 29th of Shvat. May her Neshama have an Aliyah. All right, very nice. We are on Daf Lamed Beis, Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom, continuing in the exciting and very practical sugyos relating to the placement of mezuzahs. So we wrote our mezuzahs in the last week. So now we have to put them up. We are up. V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda saying Shmuel, mitzvah lahanicha betoch chalolo shel Pesach. It is a mitzvah. You know what? Yehuda offered something, so I was going to take actually a Rambam. Maybe. Yeah, I'll take it. Probably. Let's see what we get time for. Okay. I'm not going to go into too many halachic details before we get the page done. Right? Okay. Mitzvah lahanicha betoch chalolo shel Pesach. It is a mitzvah to place the mezuzah in the opening area of the door, right? Inside the door frame area. So pshita, I mean that's pretty obvious. Bisharecha, the pasuk says the mezuzah has to be placed bisharecha, in your gates. So bisharecha marachmana. No, because salkodaita chamina, I would have thought that Hoel ve'amar Rava made a statement. Mitzvah lahanicha betefach on lamed gimel av betefach hasamach l'rishus harabim, that it's a mitzvah to put the mezuzah on the tefach which is closest to the public area, right? We're going to see if you've got a very deep, thick doorway. So do you put it anywhere in the door? It's like the old question of where do you shech the giraffe, right? The answer is anywhere, right? Or I mean, not in the living room. But where do you place your mezuzah, right? On the tefach closest to the outside, closest to the Rishus Harabim. We'll see why.
If you're on the left side of the doorpost, isn't it?
It's always on the right side as you walk in, which we will see. So since we know that kama b'samach rishus, we're supposed to put in the tefach, which is outside the Rishus Harabim, kama d'merachik mali, we'd think that the further outside, the better. And so maybe even outside of the doorpost, in the front, as you come in, maybe the front of the door, no, kamash malon, so this comes to tell us, no, you're supposed to put it in the doorpost within the first tefach of the door. V'amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Yehuda saying Shmuel, ksava al shnei dapin. One more point about writing mezuzah. If you write it on 2 dapin, now we have 2 Rashi and Tosfos disagree, as most of this page is going to wind up being about. What is al shnei dapin? Rashi says chetzia b'daf zeh v'chetzia b'daf zeh. You write half on 2 different columns, half on this column, half on that column. Tosfos says that can't be what's going on here, and it is 2 different sheets, 2 different parchments. So this Gemara says whichever way that it is, it's psula. You don't do it that way. It's not supposed to be done. So, l'chachila, we obviously should not do it that way, right? Meisvei, so we ask the following question. Ksava al shnei dapin v'nicha b'shnei sipin. It says that if you write the mezuzah on 2 columns, we'll say it according to Rashi first, on 2 columns, and you place it on the 2 different sides of the door, right? One on this and one on this. So then psula, it's pasul. So that seems to imply that the issue is there because the mezuzah it's been torn in half, right? So half the mezuzah got hung on this side of the door, half is on this side of the door. Ha besaf echad kshera. If you put it all into one parchment on one side of the door, it would seem that it's fine, even if you put it into 2 columns. So the answer is no. Re'uya lishnei sipin kamar. As long as we say it doesn't mean that literally you put the mezuzah on one half on this side of the door, one half on this side of the door. But as long as you wrote the mezuzah in such a way that it could be then divided easily and placed on 2 sides of the door, that would be no good. So therefore, we're talking about 2 columns, according to Rashi. Tosfos says, no, 2 pieces of parchment, we sew it together. It works nicely for Tosfos to explain how we described, remember the Gemara earlier, where we had a Sefer Torah that we were going to turn into a mezuzah, right? Because they're not written anywhere near each other in the Sefer Torah. How are you supposed to put them together?
That'd be possible because the Sefer Torah has to be written on its own thing.
So we had discussed, right, that it's possible that it could be done, right? Because Sefer Torah, we had a Sefer Torah wore out, you cut out the sections, right? But we had described that according to Rashi, potentially we were describing a situation where we cut it out and wrote the second second paragraph underneath as a possibility. You don't have to cut out both sections and sew them together, right?
This is low, and the third story is higher.
That is correct. You can't, that's what we said, Yehuda. That's correct. Yehuda was correct. Thank you. The reason you cannot do that is because we said you cannot go from higher level of Kedusha to lower level of Kedusha, but that being the only reason that you could not, right? We were trying to struggle. What do you mean? There's other reasons. Mezuzah is written differently, and we said, no, not necessarily, but just because you can't go from a Sefer Torah to Mezuzah. Okay? The Amar of Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. So Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, B'mezuzah, halech achar heker tzir. In mezuzah, you go after the hinge. So in their doors, right? If they had a door frame like so, right? So they had a mechanism where they would put, their door would, let's say like this. We'll put this over here, right? They would put a little thing here, and then a little piece over here, and then the door hinge would be a piece that would go into. I'm exaggerating the opening so that you could see it better, but like basically the door goes in front, the door swings on a hinge piece, right? That could either be inside the door frame itself, but more also it could be on the inside of the door. So you would put your door on a hinge, which was inside of the door. The result is that the door swings generally into the house that you're going into. So I was taking a look at various doors, right? It does not mean, like for example, that door to the kitchen over there, which swings into the kitchen, the hinge is on the left side. Nevertheless, you can see what we mean is that hinge is on the inside of the room. So we're going heker tzir, the hinge is on the inside of the room, therefore the door swings, the door swings into the room.
Some restaurants have those wooden doors where you can push and it swings back and forth.
Swings back and forth, yeah. So that one is good. Those where it's right in the middle of the door, it's a good question, exactly what happens in those circumstances, where to put them. Plus, it would be very problematic because putting a mezuzah in that door where it swings back so it hits, that would be a circumstance. We said the mezuzah had to be placed inside the door. If you've got a door like that, you couldn't put it inside the door because the mezuzah will continue. So what you have to do is put the mezuzah off to the side in those circumstances, like we had the French doors, like by we had no choice in those circumstances.
Or in Texas when they were going to go into
the saloons, right?
Yeah.
The good old saloons. Who's got it like a mine? He's coming on like all the. That's correct.
Both weapons in the holster.
That's correct. So you have to walk in the saloon with swinging doors. But yes. But But in any event, in these kinds of doors, we're going to look after the heker tzir, the placement of the hinge. Now, the Mefarshim explain. The rule of mezuzah is that you're supposed to place it on the right side as you enter. We're going to see why right.
Because you're leaving it on the left side.
And unless you're leaving it on the left side. Why right? Because we're going to learn later on that the right side is the dominant side, and we give the extra attention to the right side. And when a person walks, he puts his right foot first. Therefore, that's the side that he comes upon first. So therefore, we'll discuss that in the Gemara later on. We're going to want our mezuzah on the right side. So as we enter into a room or into a building, we're going to put it on the right side. We are going to determine the usage, right? Usage becomes very critical and important. The room that gets the bigger use is the room that we are entering. So therefore, from outside to inside the house, we're entering a room, you put it on the right side. If you're inside your house and you're entering from the hallway to the dining room, so which side do you put it on? So you would want to say that this hallway is in service of the living room, and therefore I put it on the right side. There are going to be rooms where the service of those two rooms becomes equal and equivalent.
And some people are about the garage. What's the reason for that?
And garage is also what we're going to see, because any place that has a use, right? You've got to put your mezuzah up wherever there is a place that's functional use, minus a place.
Except for the washroom.
Minus a place where there's the functional use is something which is not kavodic, like a bathroom or even a place that's a changing room.
Or bathhouse.
Closets.
So closets is an interesting thing.
Walk-in closets, yes.
Right? So they're right. If you need to have, in order to have usable space, and the Gemara does not mention this size, but that's one of the reasons we're going through all the Rambam right now outside, is that you need a space that's 4 amos by 4 amos. What happens if you have 16 square amos, but it's not 4 amos by 4 amos? So it is machlokas. But the general practice is we do put them up. So walk-in closets. Now, when you look at at walk-in closets, you have to reduce the space if you've got built-in dressers or things like that. That doesn't count because there's no floor space there, right? And so if you've got, the built-in hanging racks or whatever that's not where you're walking in that room. Potentially that could, although if you've got boxes on the floor or stackable furniture, then that does count because, so in any event.
It's for storage or whatever.
Right, so you've got to look, walk-in closets have a use, right? Outside storage sheds, right? They could have a use. Now the question is they're not really set up for living in. So you ask a question. They may be obligated.
Unless your wife kicks you out of the house, and you don't need somewhere else.
Correct. So I've seen on the internet, if you go on the interwebs, right, as they call it, right, if you find it out there, they have these people designing these man caves, like these sheds outside where their wives throw them out of the house, and they have the little place where they basically store all the lawn furniture and have a chair they can sit in. So
and a
TV, right? So this is what exists out there. Baruch Hashem, but in any event, they have such a thing, and so then that might be a living space that would require mezuzah. Right. Okay. In any event, knowing all of that, we need to. We might have a space that it's unclear which way the mezuzah goes, because you have the space that goes between one room or another. Am I coming in from the back door? Am I going out through this way? Which is the one that goes front? That's where Heker Tzir comes in. That's where the hinge comes in. Generally speaking, that's the way most poskim hold. However, my experience is that in Chabad, generally speaking, this Heker Tzir, they take very, very seriously. It's a primary thing. And Heker Tzir, which is unlike most other poskim, right? The Heker, the Shulchan Aruch, I think it says that always, right? So what happens is that you always look at the way the door swings. So you will walk into a Chabad shul where you have, like in Toronto, you have double doors, right? Yeah. One door swings inward and one door swings this way, so that you get this vestibule in the middle to protect the people on the inside of the building from getting freezing cold from the blast of air that comes in when you walk in the door, right? Yep. So when you open the first door that swings in, you'll find the mezuzah on your right side. And then you go to the next door and pull it and find the mezuzahs on the other side. But I'm walking in. How am I? The answer is, if you are walking into a Chabad place, then you will find that they always follow this Heker Tzir. So as you read this Gemara seems to imply Heker Tzir doesn't say anything about where its limitations are. All of the Mefarshim generally say Heker Tzir is what happens when it's a tie-breaking rule. It's not a rule that applies. So if you're in Florida, for example, this comes up a lot. In Florida, building code is that when you build your front door, the door swings outward. Is it always that way? I'm not sure if it's always that way, but many times the doors to the outside open because hurricanes blow things towards or inwards or things like that. So often you can have doors that swing outward as you're walking into a home rather than inward, which you think sounds like a little bit weird.
How about upstairs? You pull the door outward.
So pull the door outwards, so you could have such things. So in any event, right, might be an argument between Chabad and others, which side you put your mezuzah on. Okay.
Interesting.
Question's going to come up, which we'll discuss when we get to the place. What if you're a lefty?
At home, we always have
Do you put your mezuzah on the left side, if that's the dominant side?
Right.
If I put
at home, we always, when I'm walking to my door, every room I walk into my house, it's always on the right side.
So there you go. And so you watch your most of the time, it becomes not so relevant, right?
Yeah.
Right. But the question of where to put on that kitchen door, right? Am I coming from this direction and we're going back out into this area, or am I going into the kitchen? So you could see sort of even split usage.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense that it gets put on the right side and use the Heker Tzir in such circumstances. Okay, so now when we get when mezuzah, we're going to use the Heker Tzir. My Heker Tzir, what is this? Amar Rav Ada. Rav Ada says, avakta. It is the hole that you put into the door that they stick a peg or pin into in order to be able to help the door rotate on a hinge. So heichidami, how does this work? Kigon pischa de bein trei bate. It has to be a circumstance where you have an opening between two existing use spaces, two houses, bein begavri lebein nashi. Or, for example, a person who has a location in his house where he has the public area that he invites everybody in, and then he's got a more secluded area where his wife works or whatever, where she can stay, have her privacy. So in those circumstances, which way are you going into? Going in, going out. So if you've got it's a tie-breaking rule, right? Essentially how the Gemara makes it sound. So therefore, which way to plug the mezuzah, you can take a look at which way the door swings in. Reish Galusa Bona Besa, when the Reish Galusa, the exilarch. Now the exilarch is, I don't know what the word exilarch means. He's the ruler of the Jews in exile, right? He was the head of the Babylonian Jewish community. EX, right? Now I know what it means. It means that's the head of the exiled Jewish community, right? The diaspora Jewish community. He was not he was a political appointee, right? So it wasn't always the biggest tzaddik, but in this circumstance, he may not have known the halacha, but knew enough to ask a rabbi. So he built a house. Amar Leila Rav Nachman. He went to Rav Nachman and he said, "Kavali mezuzah. Could you come over and put mezuzahs on my house?" Which is sounds like very. It's not very modern, right? You call the rabbi up. I want to put up some mezuzahs. Call Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman, come on over. I want to put up some mezuzahs. And Amar lo Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, "Tali dashi bereisha. Put up your doors first." Now, it sounds like what the Gemara is saying is tied to the previous statement, right? That he wanted to know, where are all your hinges going to go so I can determine where all the doors are going to go. But actually, unfortunately, we explain this Gemara very differently. What he was doing was he had the door openings up, but he hadn't put up the door frames. So what he invited Rav Nachman over to do was put the mezuzahs on the door frames, and then we'll put the door frames into the doors, and we'll be ready to go. And Rav Nachman answered, that is a problem of what we call tasev lo min ha'osli. Tasev lo min ha'osli we find in sukkah building, right? That means that you're supposed to, when the Torah tells us to do something, you actually have to do that thing, not remove something and create something that was built. So, for example, I have a haystack, right? And I hollow out the inside, thereby creating a sukkah. By removing the inside of the haystack, not by putting schach onto something, it becomes very practical because our sukkahs are usually built with a frame.
Okay, but like with wind, with the haystack, like with wind.
Well, the issue, yes, well, yeah, you have to be able to put it in some place. Wind would not be an issue, but that's a good point. That's why we go with these metal frame sukkahs. But if you go with a metal frame sukkah, tempting, put up your metal frame and then roll your schach over and then come back later and put the walls up. Cannot do that because if you put your schach up before the sukkah is kosher, then you have a problem of tasev illumina also.
Our sukkah is like wooden right? frame.
So you got to put the walls up first, then come back and put
we have wooden frame with corrugated walls.
Good, but you have to make sure you put the corrugated walls up first before you put the schach up. Similarly, we find these sorts of things with tzitzis, right? If somebody ties tzitzis onto a garment and then snips and makes it into a four-corner garment, problematic, right? So it's tasev illumina also. Where if you
even with the fringes on it.
That's the issue, right? If you make it together with the fringes on it, so then that's going to be a problem. You've got to tie tzitzis onto an existing four-quarter garment. Right. Same thing with a mezuzah. You have to put it into an existing doorpost. If the door doesn't exist yet, and you attach the mezuzah to the piece of wood, the framing material, right? Not where the door is going to go up on. You put it into the wooden frame before you stick it up onto the door. That's no good. Right, you got to put the door frames up. Then, once the door frames are up, then you got to put the mezuzah there. So, tasev illumina osoi is a little bit of a chiddush by mezuzah because it's not written in the right that it says va'asisim. It doesn't say you have to make it, but it does say that you're supposed to affix it. So, therefore, it has to. That's what Rav Nachman is telling him. Tasev illumina osoi is an issue by mezuzah. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Rav Yosef and Rav asa kimin neger. So if he makes the mezuzah like a peg, like a bolt, right? So then it's psula, then it's puzzle. How do you make it like a bolt? So a door, right? Like this, and in order to lock my door, I put this bolt that goes this way into the door in order to close and lock my door, right? So if I put my mezuzah, I drill a hole in and I put my mezuzah flat, like so, that's no good. Right, that I can't do. That's psula. Ini.
If you have a bolt there, right? But you can put your mezuzah on top of the bolt, and then put the bolt underneath.
Yeah, but again, don't bring up all the different cases yet, Yehuda. Let's hear what the Gemara says first, right? Okay. You could do a lot of things. You could put mezuzahs up in the right way, right? But here, you can't put. We know we cannot put up in a bolt. You can't drill it in and put it in. That's possible. Ini, is that true? V'haki also Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef. When Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef came from Eretz Yisrael. So he says, Amar, he said, Kuluhu mezuzta debei Rebbe. All of the mezuzahs in Rebbe's house was kiminneger hayu avidon. They were all made like bolts. Vahi pischa de'ayil bei Rebbe lebei midrasha lo havola. And the door that Rebbe went from the base medrash into the base medrash with didn't have a mezuzah at all. We're going to have to discuss that, why there's no mezuzah on his base medrash door. So lo kasha, so that's not a contradiction. Ha Davida kisiksa, ha Davida ki istavira. Now the translation of these words is very critical. Big machlokas Rashi and Tosfos. So Rashi says that that which we said is that mezuzah that is puzzle is where you put it lying down on its side. So if I've got a door, right? If I've got my door, let's say like this, I put my mezuzah sideways like this, that's where it's going to be puzzle. Can't put a mezuzah lying down. However, if I make it straight up, that's going to be kosher. That's the way that I want to be able to make my mezuzah straight up. That's what Rashi says. And what he did is he put his mezuzah up in an istavira, which Rashi says it was partially horizontal and partially vertical, like a nun or a backwards L, right? And in that circumstance, that's why it was unusual. People didn't usually put them up that way, but that would be acceptable for him to be able to put it up that way.
How do you put it? I don't.
Right, and also the question that people ask on Rashi is, doesn't that look like he's folding his mezuzah, right? It doesn't look like it's comfortable for the mezuzah. The parchment was actually folded, right? And that sort of a circumstance. Says Tosfos says, I don't know what Rashi's talking about. Putting something standing up is disrespectful, right? This would be very disrespectful. He says that we call this a kvuras chamor, the way that donkeys are buried. And I don't know that donkeys are buried standing up. I've never buried a donkey, so I don't know. But it is that called because that is not respectful. And Tosfos says, very interestingly, how do we put our Toros in the Aron Kodesh?
Yeah.
Lying down, of course. Now, that's not how we put our Toros in the Aron Kodesh, very interestingly. But I had heard that Belz Hasidim, apparently, they put in their Aron Kodesh. I'd have to take a look and look it up to see if it's true. I never noticed or never looked, but apparently they lie the Torahs down in their Aron Kodesh. He says, standing up is disrespectful. That is not the right way. Therefore, the proper way is it shouldn't be standing up. It should be lying down, right? Mezuzah should be all lying down. And that which we say that the mezuzah in Rebbe's house was istavira, it means that it was partially up and partially down, means that it was at a diagonal, right? And that's a nice way for the diagonal to be. Yes. So now in practice, we follow the diagonal. This is, they say, is the compromise position between Rashi and Tosfos, which sends the message that when you go into your house, compromise. Right? The first thing you should know when you walk into your house is that it's all about compromise, right? Of all the places that have a halacha that you go, not like Rashi, not like Tosfos, but somewhere in the middle, this is a good one. Yeah. It's a little bit of a difficult sugya because of all the words and all the translations to be able to understand. Putting it is the problem, like some achronim say, the problem with putting it sideways isn't sideways per se, but it's the fact that you're sticking it deep into the door. But anyway, Rashi says, not sideways, up, down. Tosfos says not up, down, sideways, and we put it in a diagonal. Okay?
Ashkenazim.
That's correct. Now, if your doorway is too narrow to get it into a slant, halacha is like Rashi, and we put it straight up and down, right? So in a pinch, right, then that's what you could do. Now, what about the doorpost that had no mezuzah on it at all? Ini, is that true? We know that the door that Rav Huna went into his base medrash, vehavyole mezuzah, he had a mezuzah. So how do we have Rebbes that did not, and Rav Huna has one? So the answer is, a base medrash does not require a mezuzah. That's what we're saying. A base medrash, a makom that you have is not obligate. A makom that has that is for public Torah use does not require a base medrash, like a base medrash or a shul does not require a mezuzah. Seems we put one on. The minhag is to put one on in any event without a bracha for sure, right? But However, that door was ragil hava. He was ready. He used to go in there all the time, and therefore he put one up to the base medrash. When it comes to mezuzah, you go by what is the common use. Apparently, Rav's mezuzah, Rebbe's door that he had was a private personal door that he used to enter, like he had like a back door, and he used to come into the base medrash that way, so that when he would come in and everybody's learning, nobody would have to stand up and it was difficult, right? Cause everybody disruption to the learning. So when he would come in through the side door. It was not the door that everybody used. It was a personal door, and then potentially that door doesn't require mezuzah.
There is a big shul in the city where I believe there are no mezuzahs on the door.
Yep.
And I was like very surprised, and I never understood.
Yep. So they don't put mezuzahs on the door. So, and that brings the issue up here, because at the end the Gemara seems to imply that the only reason that there isn't a mezuzah is because it wasn't the normal use door. But if it was a normal use door, the base medrash would need a mezuzah.
Right.
So I think it's the Rambam who says that what's going on here is that the door that they were using, that was the door from Rav Huna's house that went into the base medrash. And I guess he had a connection from his house to the base medrash. And since that door went out from his house to the base medrash, it did require a mezuzah. But a door to a mezuzah by itself would not necessarily require a mezuzah.
A door to a mezuzah wouldn't require a mezuzah?
Sorry?
You said a door to a mezuzah wouldn't require
Door to a base medrash does not require it. So, like for example, he quotes here the Yerushalmi in Maseches Megillah, which says that Rabbi Chanina, right, his base medrash had one, right, and the Beis Yosef says Yesh lahachmir kedas Yerushalmi. We should be machmir like the Yerushalmi and put one up. But you don't put it, but you don't make a bracha when you put it up, right? What happens in here? It's a great question, right? I would presume that now this area downstairs has been designated as a shul very, very much. It probably would be in the category of the shul. What happens when you go from the staircase up to the living area? That would be this example of like Rav Huna, where the doorway went from the base medrash to his house, and therefore that would be where you do need to put up a mezuzah, right? Okay.
Wow.
Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav Masna, Amar Shmuel. Reb Zera says in Rav Masna in the name of Shmuel, mitzvah lahanicha betchilas shlish ha'elyon. The mitzvah is to place the mezuzah in the top third of the door. Rav Huna Amar Magbia min hakarka tefach umarchik min hakora. Rav Huna says you can put it up. You just have to keep it off the ground a tefach and a distance from the top a tefach. Anywhere on the door is fine. V'chol pesach kulo kosher mezuzah. The entire opening of the door is kosher to put up a mezuzah there. Meisvei, but we ask the following question: Magbia min hakarka tefach umarchik min hakora tefach. V'chol pesach kulo kosher mezuzah. Div Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says what amounts to Rav Huna's opinion. One tefach off the ground from the bottom, one tefach below the top, and the entire door itself is kosher to put up a mezuzah. Rabbi Yossi disagrees. It says ukshartam ukchavtam. You shall tie your tefillin and you shall write a mezuzah, right? And so therefore their psukim are written right next to each other. Mak shirel begova, just like when you tie your tefillin, I'm going to presume that it means you put it on the top of your head. So therefore af ksiva, when you write a mezuzah, begova, you're supposed to put it at the top of the door frame. So bishlam the Rav Huna. So fine, I understand Rav Huna's opinion. Who damar Rabbi Yehuda? He's following Rabbi Yehuda's shita. El Shmuel the Amar Keman, but Shmuel, who does he hold like this top third? There's nobody who holds that way. Lo Rabbi Yehuda, lo Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi seems to imply you got to put it right at the top, as high as you can. So Amar Rav Huna, brother of Nasan, Rav Huna, the son of Rav Nasan, says, Li olam Rabbi Yossi. No, he is holding like Rabbi Yossi. So when he says Rabbi Yossi says it's got to be at the top, he doesn't mean the very, very tippy top, right? He agrees that you've got to separate a tefach from the top. But umay tchila shlisha elyon dekamar. What does it mean when Shmuel says the top third? Leharchiko. That's to tell you the maximum distance that you're supposed to distance, because you have to put it in the top of the door. So you're not going to put it at the tippy top, right? But you put it, okay? And then this line, the Shita Mekabesa says, shouldn't be here. This got inserted as a commentary, right? You shouldn't distance it from the top of the door frame more than a third. The Rambam says, lechatchila, you put it at the beginning of the top third. That's the best place to put it, because he's interpreting that Shmuel is explaining the opinion of Rabbi Yossi to say that the right space, the upper part, is a third, and then Who is it that says this? Is it the Tur who comments that the line connecting it to tefillin is actually a not just the head tefillin, but the arm tefillin. And just as the arm tefillin, we don't put it all the way up here, we put it a little of the way down, so to the mezuzah goes a little bit of the way down.
Between the arm and the elbow.
That's correct. So therefore also mezuzah is not at the very top, it's all the way down. Okay. What happens if your door is 20 feet tall? So where do you put your mezuzah? You got to put it way up at the top. So the halachic practice is that then when your door is extremely tall, then the actual functional doorway is less than that, and therefore the mezuzah gets placed at shoulder height.
So if you do put it on top, you need a step ladder to get up there.
Right, you don't. So you're not going to do that. So shoulder height. Correct. So you get very tall doors. Exactly. So they put it at shoulder height. Whose shoulder? Right. So the answer is common shoulder height. Right. So you're in preschool. Right? And the common person who walks and uses this door is 2.5 feet tall. So where do you put your mezuzah? So this question comes up in schools, and I get asked this question often. Should we put the mezuzah lower down? Right? And the answer is no, because the halachic requirement of mezuzah, as we're going to see with all of these things, and it's going to be the same issue with lefties, is it's a requirement on the door and on the house, generally, not this door and this house. So therefore, despite the fact that most of the people who use this doorway are 2.5 feet tall, nevertheless, the right height of the door is a third of the way up. So questions that happen is people say, well, maybe we'll put 2 mezuzahs up, we could teach the kids to kiss mezuzah. Generally speaking, a rule of chinuch is that we make the mitzvah, we teach the mitzvah to be done properly, right? You don't give your kid a lemon to shake lulav and esrog, right? That's not the mitzvah. Right. If you're not old enough to do the mitzvah, that's fine. Don't do the mitzvah. Right. But if you're going to do the mitzvah, you do the mitzvah in the proper way. You don't teach the kid to do the mitzvah in an improper way. So putting
this idea of like a puzzle.
Right. So
you lift him up, put it.
So what you would do with kids is you get the chinuch set, which has all of the leniencies, and it's barely kosher, but that's why you do it, because it's the chinuch set. You get the cheap chinuch set, which is still not so cheap. But that's if you want your child to have a lulav and esrog, right? Now, if you have the little kid and you give him the stuffed lulav and esrog, so I think that they understand that you're not doing it l'shem the mitzvah or whatever, that you're holding your stuffed animal lulav and esrog. That I think is okay. But when you're going to put up a mezuzah, it would not be. We do not have at Eitz Chaim the mezuzah is lowered down on the door for the little kids to practice kissing the mezuzah. Where does kissing the mezuzah even come from? Right? So we had learned in Maseches Avodah Zarah about Onkelos, right, where they tried to convert him, and they sent the guards over to get him, and he kept talking them into converting, and then they were told, don't talk to him, and he didn't, and then as he was leaving, he put his hand on the mezuzah. And they said, what is that? And then he kept telling them things like, the king doesn't care about you, and Hashem takes care of us. And then when he put his hand on the mezuzah, they said, fine, what is that? And they said, well, this is the guard. Hashem stands outside the doors to protect us, rather than we stand outside the doors to protect the king.
The thing that Uncle used was that actual mezuzah, or was it
that was his real mezuzah. So therefore, he put his hand on that mezuzah. So therefore, the source, I guess, for kissing, we kissed the mezuzah because we touched it, but we touched the mezuzah on our way in and our way out. Would seem that Gemara would be a good reference to that. But it's not required, and so therefore, for a kid, it's probably better for him to see the mezuzah in the right place, even if he can't reach it, right, than to put it in a lower situation. If you want to put up step stools,
you can lift him up.
Can lift him up or put up a step stool, but okay. Amar Rava. Rava says, mitzvah lahanicha betefach hasamach l'rishus harabim. You're supposed to put the mezuzah in the tefach, which is closest to the public area. My time, what's the reason? Rabbanan Amri Kadei sheyifka b'mezuzah miyad, so that you get to the mezuzah as soon as you enter the area. Rabbi Chanina Misura Amar Kihechide Tintere. The answer is because it's going to provide the maximum protection, right? The further in, that's the further section that's not protected. Amar Rabbi Chanina Bore Shelo Kemidas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Midas Basar Vadam. Look, Hashem is not like other kings. Midas Basar V'Dam, a human king, HaMelech Yoshev Mibafnim. This is what Onkelos had told them. The king sits inside, Ve'am Mishamrim Osomi B'chutz, and his servants serve him outside. Midas HaKadosh Baruch Hu Eino king. That's not how Hashem is. Avadav Yoshev Mibafnim, the servants sit inside, Ve'hum Mishamran Mibachutz, he stands outside to protect them. Shenemar, the pasuk says, Hashem Shomrecha, Hashem Tzilcha Al Yad Yaminecha. Hashem guards you. Hashem is your protection, your shade, all on your right hand side. Okay. Darash Rav Yosef Braid Rava Mishmei Rava. Rav Yosef, the son of Rava, explained the following of Rava: Hemik lo tefach psula. If you dig a recess into your door of a tefach, then your mezuzah is no good. Right? You can't dig into it.
Recess into the door. What does that mean?
That means you carve a hole in your door and shove the mezuzah way down. Right? If you go to houses in Yerushalayim and things, they actually do have the mezuzahs
In the slot.
the slot into the door, but they're not a tefach dif.
Flush
They're
mount.
flush, yeah, flush mount mezuzahs, exactly. Flush mount mezuzah is not a problem. It sounds like tefach, right? If you get too far in, then a tefach is a problem. So lema misayele, let's say the following supports that position. Henicha bepatzin, if you put the mezuzah into the door frame posts, o shetala aleha malbain, or you put bricks over the top of your mezuzah. As you're building, you put the mezuzah and then you cover it with bricks. So then, im yesh sham tefach, if there's a thickness of a tefach, tzarech mezuzah acheres, it needs another mezuzah. Im lav, eno tzarech mezuzah acheres. But if not, then that mezuzah is fine. So therefore, that proves it, right? No. That's a completely different, very complicated case that has my head spinning in all the different explanations. We'll give a couple. Kitanya, that brisa is bepesach sha'achori hadelas. This is the circumstance where the door is behind, the opening is behind the door. What's going on here? So, the explanation that there's a nice picture here, and I'm not quite sure who's.
ArtScroll has a picture as well.
ArtScroll has a picture which is actually, I think, is nicer. Hang on. So I've got my overhead view here. Okay, so I've got door number 1 and door number 2. Okay, and this door opens here, swings open this way. I've got my door here, and I've got my door here, and I've got my doorpost in between. So if I put my mezuzah here, the issue of needing a tefach is if this doorpost here has a tefach thickness, if I put my mezuzah on this door, it doesn't count for this door because the mezuzah is on this side, not on this side. Problem with this explanation is then you're putting your mezuzah on the left side.
Yeah.
Then that's a little bit of a challenge. ArtScroll has a nice picture. ArtScroll says, I looked at it yesterday afterwards. ArtScroll puts a nice picture and it says like this, same picture, but I put my mezuzah here. If I've got a tefach thick doorpost here, then this mezuzah, if it's not a tefach, this mezuzah might cover both doorways, right? But it's a little bit tricky, that explanation, because this mezuzah is not in this doorway. The other explanation at least puts the mezuzah in the doorway. Then another explanation, which is kind of nice from the Bach, he says, let's expand the picture a little bit, and let's say that you've got 2 rooms, right? You've got 1 room here and 1 room here, and this is what I've got here. So this doorway, I've got a doorpost right here. Let's see, like this, okay, this is, pick out the right marker on purpose. Okay, and I've got my doorpost right over here, okay? So this door, right, is door number 1 on the right side, and it swings in, here's the door number 2, and I put my mezuzah on this doorpost. It's a very nice explanation, right? Solves all the problems with the right-hand side and being the 2 doorways, right? You could see that the mezuzah on that corner would function in both doorways, right? Again, if that doorway has a thickness of a tefach, then it will separate between the 2 doors. In any event, that doesn't prove our point. Doesn't say our point is wrong, but this brisa doesn't prove the point about needing to have a tefach space. There's another explanation that I think Rashi gives about having a big door, right, like a garage door, and then a smaller opening next to it, right, which is the door that really everybody uses more often, right? So I put my mezuzah on this door, right? Does it count for this door?
So some houses just have 1 door. Don't.
So therefore, if I've got my mezuzah here and it's right next to it, and this is the small door, can this count for it? And the problem with that again is this mezuzah has nothing to do with this doorway. It's a little bit tricky again. Right. So all the explanations, right? I like the Bach's explanation of it the best, but you have to take into consideration all of these explanations and wind up putting up mezuzahs. If you actually have a door like that, it can get complicated.
Let's look at these garage doors where there's a door built into the door.
Yeah, if a door built into the door, okay, yeah, so then, yeah. If it's movable, if it's an opening, is that even a doorway? Okay, so now, Baha behedya katani. We learned that specifically in the brisa. The brisa says Pesach shachorei adelas, the door that's behind the other door. If it has a tefach, it needs another mezuzah. And if not, doesn't. So then, why did then you say if then the next case has to be a different case? The answer is no. Ketz katani. The Mishnah just says that as the general explanation of what's going on, and then has a explanation. Meaning that if the doorpost has a tefach, it doesn't have a tefach, you put a brick over it. But that's what's going on in that brisa. Okay, next mezuzah issue. Tana, hamid la malbein shel kanim. So if you put your doorpost up and it's got made out of reeds, so then chotech shifoferes, cut into the doorpost a little bit, remove a piece of the reed, umanicha, you put the mezuzah nicely, because reeds are hollow and hollow tubes, put a nice mezuzah right into there, no issue, right? Like that. Amar Ravacha braid Rava. Ravacha, the son of Rava, says, Lo shanu ela shehem mid ulu besof chatach. That's as long as you put the door frame up first, as we said, and then you cut it open, vehiniach, and put it in. Aval, chatach vehiniach, if you cut the reed open first, and then you put it in, so then, that's a psula, because that's tasev lo menachos. That's our problem of tasev lo menachos, as we said. V'amar Rava. Rava says, Hani pischei shimoi. Unfinished doorways, right? Unfinished doorways. I've got my door, and I make it out of bricks, and it looks like this. My bricks are going out into the door, right? And then up above, I might have a nice door, but then it goes in again, and I've got my bricks because the wall goes like this.
It looks like a puzzle piece.
It does, right? It does. My bricks are going like this, right? And then the next row of bricks goes like this, right? See what I'm saying?
Now it's coming together.
Right?
That's better.
Yeah, I'm seeing it now.
Right? I had a master. Right? Okay, so you're making the bricks, right? So, and the bricks are sticking out. You don't have an even flat doorpost.
Right.
So if you have that, they're pturin, mina mezuzah. There's no mezuzah necessary, right? If it's not a flat, even doorpost. My pischei shamai, what does that mean? That these are shamai doorposts. Pligi bar Rav Rechumi va'Abba Yossi. It's an argument between Rav Rechumi and Rabbi Yossi. Chad Omar deleis lehu tikra, if it doesn't have a top, meaning the door, like you could have, you have like this doorpost right here. You got this nice thing that's supporting the beam, but it creates a door with sort of a thing. But there's no top to that at all, right? So then, without a door top, there's no mezuzah necessary over that. And v'chad Omar deleis lehu shkufi, it doesn't have doorposts. Right, without the doorposts, then it doesn't count either. Amar Rabba Bar Shila Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Shila said, Rav Chisda, achsadra. If I've got an achsadra is a large room that has 3 walls, not 4. Okay, so it's a 3-walled room. Right, my overhead pictures. All my pictures are overhead because it's easier to see. But right, that's it. And it's got a roof over it, but it's got 3 walls. That's it. P'turim and a mezuzah. No mezuzah necessary. Lefish eimba p'tzimin. Because it has no door frame on the 4th side. So what do you mean? Hayesh la p'tzimin chayeves? If you would, let's say you put a door frame here, right? And you put a thing here, then it would? Then you would need a mezuzah? No, because that wouldn't be. Because lechizik tikra lo hu davidi. That's only there in order to put a beam across to hold the roof up. Right? That's the only reason you put that there. That's not a door frame. So, hachid kamar, this is what he means. Afal pisha yesh la pitzimin, even though it has posts to hold it up, Tura, it's exempt from a mezuzah. She'ein asuyin ela chizuk letikra, because that's not a doorpost. That's just there, it's like a support beam. And so therefore that doesn't require a mezuzah. Amar Abaye, Abaye says, Chazina lahu lispalidi de beimar. I saw the ispalidi of Mar's house. Ispalidi is another word for an achsadra, and de islahu pitzime v'leislu mezuzah, that in fact it had these posts that were holding the roof up and had no mezuzah, because savar lechizik tikrahu Davidi figured that it was because it's holding up the roof. Meisvei, so he asked a fine question. Beis shar, a beis shar is a gatehouse that is used to, they would put the guard out there in order to watch the door, watch the keep everything secure. Achsadra is this 3-room, and a mirpeses, which is like a porch, right? You go through there and go to the house. Chayavin b'mezuzah, they're all obligated in mezuzah, midrabanan, right? They're obligated in mezuzah midrabanan. Now, B'achsadra de beirav. The answer is no. The achsadra, since it's an achsadra, is required. The answer is that's not the same type of achsadra. This is a achsadra de beirav. This was a classroom. What they would do is they would build these rooms where the walls were half height, right? And those basically were real rooms. They were just half height so that there would be plenty of air because there were lots of people in it. So therefore it would be nice and airy, but they were half height walls. So they were fully.
The size of a doghouse?
Half height, yeah,
Like a cubicle or something.
Well, they were like 10 tefachim walls, right? And then the rest, and then they had a pole to hold the roof up, but they basically had 10 tefachim. So once a wall is 10 tefachim, it's a regular wall. So of course it requires a mezuzah. So achsad rav ki in deruna malsuhu, then it's 100% like a regular room. Of course it needs a mezuzah. So the answer is b'achsadra romesa. We're talking about a Roman achsadra. Roman achsadra apparently had lots of windows in it, and therefore the walls were not even 10 tefachim all the way up. It had lots of openings to it, and so therefore we might have thought it doesn't need a mezuzah. The answer is no, it does need a mezuzah, but it's not the same thing as having a room that has the fourth wall completely missing. Amar Rachba, Amar Rav Yehuda, Rachba says in Rav Yehuda, Harziki chayav b'shtei mezuzos. A harziki needs to have two mezuzos. So my bei harziki, what is a bei harziki? Rav Papa Saba Mishmei de Rav. So Rav Papa, the elder, said the name of Rav. Beis Shar HaPesuach Lechatzer Ubatim Pesuchim LeBeis Shar. If you've got a gatehouse that opens up to a court into the yard, and then it then goes into the house, almost like our mudrooms, right? Like we've got those porches, right? When we walk into our house, we open the door, we walk into that front area, and then into the house. So that requires a mezuzah at the front area and into the house. Right? Not just by the front door.
Even if you don't have the dalet by dalet.
Oh, so it sounds like since it's an opening into the next opening, it needs, even if it's not dalet al dalet, right? Because it's an opening that serves the next opening. Right? Tana Rabban, our rabbis learned. Beishar pasuach. Right, although I'm not 100% sure of the answer to that question now that you're saying it. I'm very hesitant to say that. I believe the answer is yes. You do, because it's a door servicing the door that goes to the inside. So since your house has the dalet al dalet, the Beis Shar requires it also. Okay, so Tana Rabban Beis Shar HaPesuach Legina. If I have a gatehouse which opens into the garden, vegetable garden, Ule kitonis, and on the other side it goes into a small room. Okay, so I've got like you go into like these Butterfly World, or if you've ever been to like any of those places where they have birds or whatever, you've got like the double first door goes in, and then you've got another door that goes into the next area, right? So that's you basically have
Jurassic Park,
right? Or like Jurassic Park, but so the dinosaurs don't follow you through. Right? So that's correct. Yeah. So you basically, but you've got like the garden is outside, and then you've got this little hallway, and then it goes into the house. Rabbi Yossi Omer Nidon Kikitonis. Rabbi Yossi says it's like the inside room, and V'chama Omer Nidon Kibeis Shar, that the whole thing is like a airspace. Now we're going to change this girsa according to the Shita, because a Beis Shar we just said does need a mezuzah. So we're trying to say that this doesn't need a mezuzah. He says it should read it's ki'avir. It's like open space. So it doesn't need a mezuzah. Rav Shmuel Dabri Tavayu. Rav and Shmuel, both of them say, Migina labayis kuliyama lo pligi. Everyone agrees that from the garden to the house, that needs a mezuzah. My timer, what's the reason? Bia debayis he. That's the entrance to the house. Ki pligi mi bayis legina. The question is, if you're coming into from the house to the garden, right? Whether you need to have a mezuzah there, which I guess is from the side, from going from the garden into the hallway, going into the house. That's the way we're going to explain this. There's lots of, again, one of these Gemaras where there's lots of different ways to understand what's going on here. Mar Savar Kitonis Iker, one says that the house and the inside is the main thing, right? And therefore the door is going to where the door is going to open it towards that, and therefore it's basically an opening into the hallway which goes into the house. Umar Savar Gina Ha'ikar, and the other one says no, the garden itself is a place for it to enter into, and therefore since the garden itself is important, so you don't need a mezuzah to go from the outside into a garden. because there's no living space there, and therefore you don't need it.
Well, is this like practical for going into your backyard?
So if you have a gate that goes into your backyard, right, that might be, right, if I don't know that you would need, according to this, right, the practical question, a door that goes to your house, right, but if a door goes from the side of your house into your backyard, might not need one, right, because the outside, because if the main idea, unless the whole idea is, yes, if I'm going into my backyard, which goes into my house, but I don't think so, right, going into the gate to your backyard sounds like you don't need. Rabbi Rav Yosef Damri Tavahu, Rabbi Rav Yosef, both of them says, Mi bias legino dekuli amalo pligi. Rabbi Rav Yosef say, no, from the house to the garden, right, doesn't need. Dekuli amalo pligi depotter. Everyone agrees that that is exempt from mezuzah. My taima. Why? Pischa deginahu, because that is a opening to the garden. In other words, the first explanation was they were arguing about that door. No, they're not arguing about that door. Ki pligi migino labayis. They're arguing actually to go into the house. Marsavar Bia Debayis, who one says it's an opening to the house, and Marsavar Kula Adato Deginahu Davida. Even that little small room was only made in order, like a storage shed, in order to help the garden. And so therefore it doesn't even need a mezuzah on that door as well. Right? And so therefore that's not gonna, right, that that's not gonna require mezuzah either. So, okay, so that's the different opinions. Abai v'Rava avdi ke Rabba v'Rav Yosef. So Abai v'Rava, they acted like Rabba and Rav Yosef, and Rav Ashi Ovid ke Rav Shmuel, and Rav Ashi followed Rav and Shmuel's opinion, lechumra, and he was strict. The hilchos, the halacha is ke Rav Shmuel lechumra, that we go strict, right? And we're going to put the mezuzah, and we're going to put the mezuzah up on the inside door for sure, and then we're going to follow Heker Tzir. If the door swings into the garden or inside towards the house, then we're going to put the mezuzah on that door, and if not, then not. One more little piece. We're on Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. Itmar, it has been said, Lul pasuach min habayis la'aliyah. This exact, if I were to draw you a picture, it would be very difficult to explain. The door to the staircase that goes upstairs. That people living upstairs, tenants, and downstairs. You don't want your tenants coming downstairs into your living room. They didn't have extra entrances for the second floor.
Actually, the tenant should have sleep in the basement.
So the guy is in the first floor, and the other people live up on the second floor. So he's got a door that you have to go into. So now you've got this little area. So Amar Rav says, Amar Rav Huna says, Im yesh lo pesach echad, if it's only got one door, right, to the house or to the upstairs, chayiv mezuzah achas, then it needs one mezuzah. Im yesh lo shnei pesachim, if it has two doors, one at the bottom of the stairs, one at the top of the stairs, chayiv b'shtei mezuzahs, it needs two mezuzahs. Amar Rav Papa says, Shema min amid Rav Huna, you can learn from Rav Huna, Hai indruna d'isle arba abavi, if you've got a room that has four doorways, chayiv bar mezuzahs, it needs four mezuzahs. Pshita, obviously. No, lo tzricha, af agav derogil bechad, even though that's not your normal door, it is going to count that way, right? You still need every single door. It doesn't matter. As long as it's multiple people use it, it is a door, and therefore it needs a mezuzah. Okay, we'll pick up from
Amemar.
Amar Amemar.